right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Get Think Tanked, our Thursday happy hour where we like to get together and interview really interesting people and bring all of our friends and guests up to talk with us. So today I'm really excited because I'm bringing my friend Dr. Aaron Turner on to the show. So we're going to be a little bit less stock market-y, although everything that Aaron talks about has a big impact on the business community and how to think about how to stay sane while working in this insane industry, I guess is one way to put it. And that's actually how I got to meet him through Spark, which is Jim Weinst's media network. So with that, let me introduce Cynthia, and then we'll go around the horn and we'll get to Aaron in a few minutes.
Hey guys, Cynthia Murphy, head of research for the ETF Think Tank. Thanks for joining us at 5. We're excited. We have a great guest and a great show today. So we're excited to be here. David, you want to go next?
Absolutely. David Chikansky here, portfolio manager of the Title Financial Group. I focus on the SoFi Be Your Own Boss ETF, BYOB, as well as the Amplify Inflation Fighting ETF, IWIN. Very excited to be here. I'll pass it off to our esteemed professor.
Hi, everyone. Dan Weisskopf here, live at almost 5:05. Let's see. So co-PM of Block, member of the investment committee at Title. The guy who always talks about how structure matters and people tilt their head and say, why? Well, a whole lot of reason, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. Mike, do I introduce you again, or do I shoot it over to
You can
Dr.
introduce
Turner?
Aaron. You can introduce Aaron again.
With that, I'll just pass it over to Dr. Aaron Turner so we can really find out about how people can find balance in their lives.
Great. So my name is Aaron Turner, and 13 years ago, I founded One Thought with the mission to bring an understanding of clarity of mind and state of mind to the business community.
So that is as concise as it gets, and yet nobody knows exactly how that really functions because none of us have clarity of mind on a general basis. So yes, that's right. I forgot to say clarity is going to be our word. So nobody's going to have clarity of mind by the end of this show either. But I thought, because I've seen you give the lectures about it, I've heard your origin story. I think, what was the decision tree that got you to make that decision to leave whatever you were doing in the past and decide to dedicate yourself to a rather hefty mission? So,
yeah. Well, before I got involved in this, I was headed to being an academic. I was an anthropological researcher at a university in London. And I wasn't interested in psychology at all. So I was not primed to get involved in this field at all. I'll try to be a little cautious of saying clarity. Oh, never mind. So, yeah, I wasn't interested in the mind at all. I thought thinking about yourself, thinking about how you felt was just a waste of time. You should just get comfortable with it and forge on. Well, as I was getting my research career going, my uncle, who was a psychologist in the Northwest of America, asked me to research his work. He said, look, I want you to research what I'm doing, and I want you to compare it to other psychologies. So I thought, well, great. I mean, I could do with as much research experience as possible. So I took the job. And as I started to study what he was doing, it was a complete departure from all the other psychological theories. In two ways, it was completely unconcerned with the way that people think, and it was focused on their ever-present, effortless potential for clarity. So every other psychological approach, you had to work to improve your psychological situation. They were basically saying, well, clarity, well-being is all natural, and people just don't understand how it works. It's a missing understanding. There's nothing really wrong with people other than they don't understand their mind. So that intrigued me. But what really got my attention was I'd never seen people change as quickly as the people in their programs. So people would come in with problems. And the first thing that interested me about their work was people would sit down, like I was sitting in with a couple and there'd been an affair and they were both really upset and they came for help. And the people that worked with them would not talk about the problem. They would just talk so generally. I didn't even understand what they were talking about. But yet within a couple of days, these people would come in fantastic states of mind, huge amounts of clarity, very connected, didn't feel like their issue was a problem anymore. And it challenged what I thought, that you could have a different state of mind without your problems changing. And when the state of mind improved, the problem wasn't such a problem. So that got me interested. And as I got interested, my state of mind started to improve. And as my state of mind started to improve, everything in my life changed. So my career started taking off. I went from middling at best to kind of being the star of the department. And my relationships, like you know how most people have a relationship life, that most of their relationships are a certain length of time. Well, mine was 3 months. And after I learned about this, that disappeared, that 3 months. The person I was dating at the time, I'm still married to, happily married most of the time. And so I decided I want to help people see that their life could be so much easier and better if their state of mind improved, which I don't think people realize. I think they feel like you have to work harder or you have to get something to happen. Not like your state of mind is driving your quality of life and your outcomes. And I did an internship, and the work that fascinated me the most was the business work. Because in the business work, not only did you see people's well-being improve when their clarity of mind improved, but without any additional work or effort, every metric improved. So when we work with businesses, people get more done, but they work less hours, right? Their revenues increase, their costs go down, their attrition reduces, their communication improves, their meeting times go down, but their meeting productivity and engagement go up. So what I started to see was that the outcomes in organizations, there was a huge state of mind piece in people's outcomes, but nobody was looking at state of mind. So it was kind of an untapped resource. So that's when I realized I really feel like this understanding belongs within business and organizations. Not only is it good for people, but it's an unaddressed performance variable. And not only that, it goes mostly unnoticed. So most people in organizations are the unwitting victims of their state of mind. It's affecting them in ways they don't understand. They try to fix it with all sorts of other variables, and they never have much luck. So they figure, oh God, I guess there's nothing to do about that.
Go ahead, David.
Love it. So yeah, my first question is my much less eloquent attempt at trying to change my state of mind for me is viewing things as or the perspective of things you view things from, right? Literally all good things that happen into your life could be viewed as stress points, like more business, more family, more friends, those are all on their own individually day by day, a stressful thing. So is that equate with your strategy here? And then I'd say the other thing that I'd like to ask you on is I don't know, I was reading a book 2 years ago on just being kind to yourself. And I think a lot of business people are really hard on themselves. And I think that has a huge effect on your state of mind when you're I want so much I expect so much for myself, this and that. And then they're kind to everyone else, but they're actually really mean to themselves. What are your thoughts on both of those?
Well, so the key problem that we have, Dave, is that state of mind's invisible to us, so we can't address it directly. So we're always addressing it indirectly. So if you look around, there's endless tips and techniques for how to improve your state of mind, or how, what to thought systems and breathing techniques and all sorts of stuff. And that's a symptom of the fact that we don't see it. It's invisible, so we can't address it directly. So you tell me if this relates to your question, David. what we really need to do is be able to see the symptoms of our state of mind so that we can understand, well, what's our clarity of mind in any moment, right? And there's a very simple indicator of that, and we can talk about that in a little while. Once you see your clarity of mind, then you just want to, you just need to understand how it works, like how it affects you so you can adjust for it. And once you understand what determines your clarity of mind, which is all internal, by the way, you can navigate it differently. So as an example, being kind to yourself is a good example, because if you have a mean feeling about yourself, that means you have a mean thought about yourself, right? And to be kind to yourself, you just have to not listen to that thought, right? Now, our clarity of mind, the only factor that corrupts our clarity of mind is thought, right? So if you have a disturbed or a distorted thought, you will have a disturbed or distorted mind. However, if you don't buy into that thought, it won't affect your state of mind the same way. So the reason being kind to yourself worked is because you have I don't know if this is the right word, but a healthier relationship to mean thinking. Right? Now, there's so many unclear thoughts that are respected in the business community, like stress, intensity, speeding up, you know, I mean, we can, you know, you know, anxiety, yeah, being mean to yourself. But if you put these thoughts on a clarity of mind scale, they're all going to look unhelpful. Does that make sense? Yeah. So as soon, what the interesting thing is, as soon as people know that the thing that's disturbing their clarity of mind is thought, and they know how to determine whether the thought's unhelpful, they generally don't get bogged down in it much anymore. Did that answer your question, or did I miss something out?
Perfect. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can
All
I
right,
just-
Joshua.
I know it's not my turn, but can I just quickly clarify something? Like, I wonder, can you define what you mean actually by the word clarity? Is
Yeah.
it about an absence of emotion when looking at life in front of you? Is it about the ability to focus objectively on things? I mean,
Yes.
what exactly makes your mind clear versus unclear?
Yes. Well, let me work backwards from that, right? So, clarity of mind is I thought I was going to maybe give an example, but basically, if you look at people's lives, so for example, you know, I work with a few athletes, right? So, and if you ask them about their performance and you ask them when they're at their best, there's always an emotional tone to the time when they were in the zone. And that emotional tone is very at ease, not really peaceful, but unagitated, a huge presence of mind, a huge focus, very natural, automatic thinking. So like one of the squash players I worked with was, you know, he was in his 40s, but he's beating all these 20-year-olds. And when I asked him, well, how are you doing this? He says, well, it's really funny, Aaron, because they're faster than me, they're stronger than me, but because my mind's free, I know where to be before it's time to be there. Right. So as people are in this more at ease emotional state, one of the symptoms is their thinking is clearer and more natural. And it's kind of pop-up thinking, like you don't have to do anything to get it. Now, I consider that clarity because when you look at things, it's more obvious. It requires less analysis, right? As part of that state, there's also a huge amount of emotional stability. In that state, there's also kind of a more healthy flow of energy. So people don't tend to fatigue as much when their mind is free. So a clear mind is just a way of defining this whole package that goes together when people's minds are at their most productive. Now, interestingly enough, we see that clearer state is a default state. It's like, in the absence of other distraction and agitation, that's where people's minds go. So the times when people are happiest, the times when they're really clicking on all cylinders, the time where they, you know, play their best sports game, is when it's all kind of coming quite naturally, in that sometimes people describe it as a flow state, right? So it's those aspects. Oh, the other part of a clearer mind is you see things with more perspective, right? So one of the organizations that we worked with, they had this time management course that they did. And after we started teaching state of mind, the training director pulled me aside. He says, you know, something really interesting. We have repeat offenders on the time management course. They've been through it 4 or 5 times. They never get anything out of it. Since they've been through the state of mind course, they're using those skills. And what we find is that as your mind kind of settles down, your thinking gains perspective. It's more strategic. You can see the more or less important. You naturally prioritize, like your judgment improves. As your mind gets agitated, speeded up, and disturbed, everything becomes urgent and you can't tell what's more important. So there are all these really interesting symptoms of a clearer mind. The defining feature is that lack of agitated emotion. So people feel very at ease. They feel very comfortable in their own skin. They tend to feel confident. They actually connect well with others. They listen well to others. They have better comprehension. So there are all these kind of aspects of a clearer mind, and a clear mind is just a way of talking about how they all go together. They're not separate skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, the one thing I was going to add, Cynthia, is as you start to disturbed thought creates a disturbed feeling. So as you start to feel more agitated, that tells you the degree to which your clarity of mind is disturbed. So the degree to which you've lost perspective, the degree to which you're losing your intelligence, the degree to which you're more knee-jerk. And what's fascinating about it is the strength of that disturbed emotion will literally tell you the degree to which you're out of whack. It's a really objective measure.
Wow. I don't even know what to say to follow up with that, because I think my mind is always disturb and chaos. So I guess life gold is all I'm gonna say.
Let's see how Joshua's doing with his
Yeah,
clarity.
thanks for letting me jump in, Joshua. All yours.
Yeah, sure. So you talk about defining and measuring. Whenever I hear things like this, I think, well, how do I define it, and can I measure it? And as you said, it's invisible. It's like, you know, I can't see the wind, but I can see the effects of the wind.
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about your emotional state, you're saying, I can't necessarily see how clear my mind is. I can't see my state of mind, but I can look at the effects of my state of mind in order to then kind of go back into thinking, okay, well, what is the optimal emotional state for me? In what emotional state am I most productive? And
Yes.
so it sounds to me like you're saying that this is about finding there's something that's true of all of us when it comes to measuring our emotional state. There's an emotional tone when you're in the zone. There's automatic thinking. You're not agitated. But this reminds me a lot of the literature on wide focus versus narrow focus, where when we get agitated or scared or afraid, we tend our focus narrows, and we're able to see fewer things. We tend to focus very intently on a few things, which means things that are outside of our focus tend to fall or be damaged, and it causes problems in our other parts of our life or in this. But our bodies are designed that way, because when you are in danger, in your emotional state is saying danger, is saying I'm uncomfortable. It forces us to be more narrowly focused and agitated. And that agitation actually has a evolutionary function in that it causes us to be ultra focused on one thing, where in life and a lot of things, it requires us to be more relaxed and have a wider focus, take more things in, and be able to if you're in a sports game, for example, you need to be able to both be keenly focused and open to the idea of things changing. So you need to be in a sort of state where you're not agitated. But I think there's probably even some individual variation between how much agitation one individual can stand and be at their optimal state than others. And so I guess I'm part of this is me asking, am I understanding you correctly? And I think part of it's also me getting into, how do you measure those effects in order to learn about your own optimal state, emotional state.
Yeah, I got you, Josh. So the part where you're hearing me is I'm saying that the clarity of mind of a person, no matter what they're doing, affects not only how they feel, but their ability to do that thing, whatever it is. Like someone asked for a clear example, and this just came to mind. Someone I was working with, when I was talking about levels of clarity, they said that explains, the IKEA thing. And what do you mean the IKEA thing? He says, well, I go to IKEA, I get a piece of furniture, I bring it back, I'm all like trying to rush to get it done. I'm a little bit stressed, I'm a little bit rushed, and I find out the thing's badly designed, the instructions don't help, there aren't the right pieces, and it doesn't go together very well, and I get frustrated, I throw it down, I go in, I have my dinner, feeling a little calmer after dinner, I go back. The same piece of furniture is actually fairly well designed. All the pieces are there. The instructions are simple. And 20 minutes later, it's all put together. So, all other factors being equal, which is why I gave the sports example, because, fitness, strength, reaction time, strategy, experience are somewhat constant, but yet performance varies wildly because there's this clarity of mind factor. Right. And the part that you heard me on, Josh, is that, yes, that's true for everybody. And, I worked on a senior Army leadership program. And when I asked them to consider, does your performance vary with your emotional state? They said, well, of course it doesn't. We're trained to not get affected by that. I said, well, do me a favor and just have a think about it. And basically what they said is, oh my God, it really does. All my best decisions are made in this state where I had a sense of ease and lack of agitation. All other factors are variable. What knowns, unknowns, predictability, past experience, there's time to make a decision. And my worst decisions were all made in states in which I had this sense of agitation or pressure or stress or insecurity, some level of unease. So what I'm basically asking people to consider, and you said, how do you measure it? Become a student of it. Become a student of it. Start to get interested in the link between the way you feel and how things play out, right? The way you feel and the kind of results that you get, right? So, if you think about conversations, generally, you can read back the quality of a conversation from how agitated you were, And if you think of the absolute best conversations you've ever had, the most synergistic teams you've ever been on, there's that feeling of ease and general lack of agitation, because that's when people's minds function best. So the way to kind of get a feel for it is the way I did it, because I'm a skeptic. So when I started considering this, I thought it's a very elegant proposition, but it's let's see to what degree it's a helpful theory, because in my mind, every theory fails at some point, right? Because it gets to the limits of its grasp of reality. Well, 30 years in on this one, I haven't found that. I haven't found that yet. But I'm interested to see the link between that feeling state and how things play out for me. And you know, over the last 23 years, my clients in various fields.
Okay.
All right, Professor.
Nobody can see my notes here. I've got like a list of 20, and I know Mike's going to limit me to 1 or 2. So I'm in agreement with you 100%. A couple of facts I know: if I lose my temper, I yell and I
Yeah.
say stupid stuff.
Yes.
That's not clarity. I also know that if I'm leveraged on a position, I worry more, and it
Yeah.
means that my decision making has to be more volatile to keep up with the impact. Okay, so here's my question though. Hypothetically, I happen to know, maybe be married to a type A personality, right?
Yeah.
So she's very prideful about having control around things. I mean,
Yes.
shoot, we go to the same place every weekend. It takes 2 hours, maybe 2 hours and 30 minutes, maybe 90 minutes. And the clarity of thought around anger, around traffic, drives her crazy.
Yes.
I would agree that clarity of mind is really important, but how do you get there, right? So you ease into it. It's always the how that matters more than the what to me.
Yes. What's really interesting to me, Dan, about this clarity of mind feel is the how. I mean, this, you know, this is going to sound ridiculous, but the how is understanding. It's really, really interesting. See, there's several pieces of understanding, and you've got the first one. So if you don't know that your clarity of mind is varying and that your emotional quality indicates it, then you trust your mind when it's, you know, up the wall, and then you're up the wall, right? And stress is a really good example, actually. So if you have a stressful feeling, your mind is in a stress state. We don't think straight in a stress state, but in a stress state, your perception tells you there's external reasons that are driving and justifying that stress, right? That's how a state of mind works. It changes the way you see reality, and the way that you see reality justifies that state of mind. Now, if you buy that justification, you're gone, right? So the first step is you have to see that your clarity of mind is compromised. If you don't see that, you never question it, and you forge on, and it seems like everybody else is at fault. Why are people so sensitive? And why are people so slow? And, you know, all that kind of stuff. So the first thing, which is what we've talked about so far, is you got to see your state of mind, right? Now, if you want to experiment with it, just experiment with it. So for example, I had this thing at home with my wife where I would get intense and want to talk to her about stuff, you know, because when you get intense, everything looks urgent and you got to talk about it right away. So I'd go to her with that intensity and we'd have an awful conversation, right? And you know, given that I do this all day, every day, you know, it wasn't but a couple of years before it occurred to me, hey, maybe there's a state of mind issue here. Maybe I'm not in a clear mind, and that's the problem. So I thought, well, yeah, maybe so. So next time I get intense, I'm like, hey, Aaron, remember your state of mind not be too good. I say, well, I think it's good enough. This is too important. And then I charge in, and then lo and behold, we have a terrible conversation. So that kept happening until I got to the point where I was willing to consider it might not be a good idea to give myself the green light, right? You know, that definition of insanity, doing the same thing. I've been doing that for years. So I had this one time where I've got to talk to her now. I'm like, hold on, maybe I should listen to what this feeling is telling me, that my clarity of mind might not be good enough to get in the game. Now, two really interesting things happens when you do that. The first is you don't just go with the state of mind you're in. And the second is you don't rubber stamp it. See? Because as soon as you buy your own perception, when your state of mind's not clear, you validate that state of mind, and you essentially, you essentially give it the go ahead. You tell yourself it passed mustard, and then off you go. So as soon as you think, hold on, this feeling might mean that I'm just not my own best friend right now. Because I hate it when my maniac self runs my life, and then when I come around, I got to deal with the fallout. So I didn't talk to her in that state of mind. And because I didn't validate all those thoughts, they kind of faded out, right? So the second thing is to realize is a disturbed state of mind is caused by disturbed thought. Now, people don't know this, but thought has no life of its own. So if you have a thought and you don't pay it any mind, it doesn't have a leg to stand on, right? Right. So if you're working away and you have the thought, I'm hungry, and you're like, well, I'll eat later, you won't feel hungry very long, because the thought that makes you aware of the hunger will just fade out. So as soon as you don't validate your unclear thought, your mind will move on, because it's very natural for thought to move on. And you'll start to notice your mind calm down. So the only thing that stands between you and a clearer state of mind is the unclear, disturbed thought that you respect and hang on to. But that's it. It's like that old, someone told me that, there's that, monkey trap where there's a banana in a box. And if the monkey grabs the banana, he can't pull the hand out. To get the hand out, you got to let go of the banana. To have a clear mind, you got to let go of the banana. And so what's the banana? It's a very compelling, disturbed thought that has fantastic marketing.
I'll
All
let
right,
you go, Mike.
I guess it's my turn to jump in. We'll come back, Dan. We got another half hour with him, so
Please.
you can lay down. There's actually a question from Warren in the chat about, well, what does this have to do with investments? And I kind of like that, because we talked a little bit about that in the pre-show, right? Which is like, one of my superpowers is when it comes to making an investment decision, I have ice in my veins. Like, the market movement doesn't impact me. I am like cold as ice. I will buy that VIX call option on a day where the market is down 100%, and I will buy that closed-end fund that nobody would ever touch in the middle of the hell. And so, like, I recognize that clarity of mind when I'm making an investment decision. Now, come to dealing with my son and his emotions, or dealing with a client that just continually repeats the same mistake and drives me insane. I can do that first step that you're talking about. I can step aside and say, okay, this is not the right time for me to talk to this person, because I'm obviously angry with the situation, and I need to let it go. What's the next step though? Like, because when I first met you in St. Sebastian last year and I heard this, I thought, okay, I can get that first step down. I can recognize I've got a unclear mind to deal with a situation that's non-investing. So I go away from it, but eventually, a lot of times in business, at least, you're still going to have to deal with that problem.
Yes.
And you can clear your mind and come back to it. That client is still annoying. So, I'm very likely to get back to an unclear mind, right? So I would love to hear that next kind of acknowledgement or step.
Well, let's talk it out, Mike, because I think what you've pointed to is absolutely the key to it, right? I would imagine, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that when it comes to investments, that disturbed thought is going to cost you.
100% yes.
Right? It's not, it might cost me. It's not, sometimes it will cost me. It's like, look, this is my money. Like, if I listen to this thought, I'm going to pay. That, right? So there's what's really interesting about your investment persona, or like when you're investing, is you are so clear what a bad idea the unclear thought is. It never even makes it. It never even gets on the phone with you. Right? So the difference between you and in that environment and you in any other environment is there's two pieces. One is you're not really as clear that it's your thinking. So you said the client's annoying. Well, I would say, well, no. If your thinking is reactive, anything's annoying. If your thinking's not reactive, nothing's annoying. Right? So Dan might say, wow, a big position is worrying. And you'd say, no, I would never let it be worrying. And Dan would say, what do you mean?
That happened at 8:30 this morning. We had our investment committee for the blockchain fund, and there was a lot of debate.
Yeah, but what we're illustrating there is that's the understanding. It's like you benefit from the fact that you're like, my emotions are my thought, and if they're disturbed, they're just it's all bad.
Yep. And if I feel the slightest disturbance, I just say we're not making a decision. And that drives Dan crazy as well. We're having like therapy right now for our investment committee, Dan. Yeah. See, Warren, it has an impact.
Yeah. And the thing is, what Dan's saying is, Dan is like, he doesn't see that as clearly as you in this domain. He's like, no, it's the amount of money, it's the position, it's the flux, it's the flux in the market, it's what these people are doing, right? So in his mind, that feeling is labeled, big deal. In your mind, it's labeled messed up thought, right? So in the rest of your life, in these other areas, if you really considered, was that true? Like, is frustration with a client exactly the same as anxiety about an investment? Is that true? Is it literally the same? It's me that sees it different. It's exactly the same. Right? Now, I think when you do that, you'll discover, holy hell, how could it be otherwise? How could one emotion be caused by my mind and another one be caused by a client? There's got to be only one system. It can't be two systems. And then when you realize that, then you get a chance to see what the emotion's telling you. And you're like, oh my God, frustration with a client cost me money too. I can't afford that either. So like when we work with sales teams, their clarity of mind in sales meetings far outstrips their clarity of mind with their back office support staff, because they think it matters with the client and they don't think it matters with the back office support staff. And they have great relationships with the client and they have terrible relationships with the back office support staff who never give them what they want when they want it, when they need it, which costs them money. So it's literally that simplification to just break it down for yourself and be like, hold on, an emotion, what if all emotion comes from thought, never comes from the outside? And when you think about it, it's kind of funny. We think emotion comes from the outside. How could that possibly be? How could an emotion come from anywhere but from inside you? It couldn't. And then you consider, what if it's always the case that if I feel agitated, reactive, or upset, I'm just as off as I am if I had that when I'm investing? It's exactly the same. And that's the beauty of isolating the clarity of mind independent of the domain, because then you really get to see it works the same with your family, with your clients and with your investment.
I'm going to try. Cynthia.
So if this is this really just all about awareness? And if it is about awareness, is there really no scenario in which all these emotions, the intensity, the anger, the frustration, I mean, are they always necessarily bad when it comes to decision making? Can't they be like the catalysts for actual like problem solving, disruption? You are so angry and frustrated at something that your mind has never been clearer in that state because you really want to solve a problem. I mean, are they always negative when it comes to this conversation?
I used to think so, Cynthia, but I've kind of the last couple months I see it a little different. So there's two things I see is that a state of agitation, like let's say a reaction in anger or a bolt of, you know, shock or something like that, it can be useful if it wakes somebody up. It gets them engaged, right? Like a loud noise, boom, it gets them engaged. However, as soon as you come to function, as soon as you're trying to do anything, if you're angry, you're X amount out of control, and you do not see things the way that you'll see them when you're clear-minded. I guarantee you. So let's say you get really angry and you use that as an energy to get something done. And then you go home and you calm down. I guarantee you, when you're calmer and you have your perspective and your full intelligence and your mind's not disturbed or distorted, you'll see things that you would have done differently if you'd had your head together. Oh, I rushed that, or that was blown out of proportion. It wasn't as important as I thought it was. I was actually going after what upset me rather than what mattered. I was a bit too intense and out of control. I didn't really, you know, I burned a few bridges. As soon as you lose clarity, your mind is less intelligent, less responsive, less insightful, more out of control, more knee-jerk, more dysfunctional. And I'm not saying that so everybody believes me. I'm saying it so you can check it out for yourselves. Like, check it out for yourselves. Because as Mike introduced, the more, and as you said, Cynthia, the more aware you are of that, the more sensitive you become to it. Like, look how naturally Mike is sensitive to it in investing. He hasn't been taught about it. It's just, he's so clear on a clear mind and the importance of a clear mind that everything else falls into place. So you're absolutely right. And then we have problems where we have these gray areas, like, yeah, I think it was better because I was angry. Like, well, if you didn't have, like, what I've learned is if you don't have as clear a mind, your mind's a bit more messed up, and that will have consequences. Not always major consequences. There doesn't always, but there's, you know, there's definitely going to be some disruption and dysfunction built into it.
And so in that case, is sleep your natural best friend? So that way they say, sleep on it before you send that email at night or something.
Well, I think the sleep on it is walk away from it. Like, walk away from all your thinking about it so your mind can kind of come back to it fresh. That's all it is. It's like, you want to take a look at it without all the noise, without all the analysis, without all the mental disruption. You know, some people call it the static in the attic, you know, without all the static in the attic. And that's what those sayings point to, is like, when you feel agitated, your thinking's not helping you. So there's no benefit in it. So just leave it. And then when your mind's fresh, look at it when you can trust your mind. In a way, your emotions are a mental trustometer, you know?
So I love this. I know we're going to go to Joshua in a minute, but this feels like myth busting to me, right? I feel like there is something in the zeitgeist or the culture that through movies, like I remember, you think about that silly movie Dodgeball, and they have that scene where the stapler guy has to get angry to win, right? And it's almost like channeling anger, or it's something that I feel like they teach through sports. Maybe Joshua can opine on that, because I know you played football in school. Like, I do get it though. It's like, it's having an emotion is not bad, right?
No.
I think that's the key. It's recognizing it and then digesting it before making decisions, I think, is the argument. And that's kind of a myth bust to a lot of what's in our culture today, in movies and TV and whatever the kids watch nowadays. I don't know if it's on TikTok. I don't have TikTok. So Joshua, to you, my friend.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, and I'm interested in the question of what does this have to do with investing? And I think that as I conceptualize this, I think, well, my mind is the CPU that I'm using for investing. And if I think of my brain as a computer, and is it running hot? Is it using all of its bandwidth? Is it using all of its RAM?
Yeah.
And so if I take this into the literature on cognitive load, mental workload, there's some economists that do work on mental bandwidth, and they're basically talking about the brain's capacity or its ability to perform both basic functions and higher order functions and decision making. And when bandwidth is taxed, there's going to be really less RAM or less bandwidth available for using for making other decisions or other judgments. And so if you are taxed, you can say it's high, your bandwidth is taxed or your RAM is taxed, then there's going to be less available for that, which can lead to poorer decisions. And there's been research in this, but I know that some of the famous studies are related to mental bandwidth and poverty, right? And the psychology behind this. And so these resources, if you're thinking of your brain like a computer, when these resources are taxed, I can't really say, what does this have to do with investing? Because, well, if I've got all these other tabs open and they're sucking resources out of my CPU, it's not that they have something to do with investing specifically. It's just they're sucking up capacity and patience. And I'm only going to have so much ability to even be disciplined in a day. And there's been research about discipline, and discipline is something that is replenished over time, but you can increase your capacity to be disciplined. But if your life is requiring a lot of other discipline in you, you're going to kind of run out by the end of the day. So it's basically saying I've only got so many resources in my brain, and these emotions, these thoughts, if I allow them to turn into emotions and I allow those to take over my brain, then it's going to suck up my resources, suck up my mental energy, suck up my bandwidth, if you will, and then it will leave less available to me to use for my relationships, for my trading, for all these other things. So I think of it as it has to do with everything, and it's ultimately just it's about resource preservation. And so not just resource preservation, but preserving these resources in order to be able to calmly allocate them to things that are actually moving the needle forward, rather than sucking them up and keeping the vehicle stalling.
Yeah. No, I really relate to that analogy, Josh. So in a way, clarity of mind is, free mental bandwidth. And when people's mental bandwidth is free, they have all sorts of, their mind just works better. They have all sorts of capabilities and symptoms. And as you said, it's not directly to do with investment. It leverages no matter what you're doing, right? It's if you're lying on the beach or you're driving a race car, it's exactly the same. There's this enhancement to not only how you feel and experience things with a free bandwidth, but also to the capabilities and the impact you have when you're doing them, right? I've literally worked with runners who have said, I normally try to get better times, but in this clearer mind, I felt like I wasn't trying as hard, but I had my personal best. So there's this counterintuitive link between a free bandwidth. Now, the other part is, when we feel like you can have your bandwidth used up, and that creates stress, it creates overwhelm, it creates agitation, it creates pressure, but you can also have a processing virus, so negative emotions also indicate, viruses where you put data into your computer, you can't trust what comes out the other end. Right? So what's really interesting, linked to what Mike was saying is, and what people are putting on the chat is, thank God for emotions. Because without emotions, we never know how whacked out or really insightful our computer is. Because the data is always internally consistent. If you're anxious, the data looks amazing. The perception looks really justified. We're a fish in water to all of it. And the only objective measure of free bandwidth and lack of mental viruses is the quality of your emotion. So negative emotions are invaluable because they're the only way of measuring how whacked out you are, because you'll never know. Other people know. Other people like, hey, Josh, you want to take a minute? A minute? We don't have time for that. Right? So you have to catch yourself, but we have this, someone said the system's perfect. It really is. But the problem is we misread emotions. We treat emotions like they're information about the world around us. That guy sucks. I like this. I don't like that. Whereas actually it's giving us vital information about, you know, the reliability of our processing and our mental bandwidth. Great analogy. Great analogy.
I knew this was going to be a crazy conversation today, but the only objective measure is emotions. I think that line is going to take me a while to process that. Because talk about myth busting. Like, that is the ultimate myth buster.
Yeah, I'm glad you caught that one. That does, yeah, when you say it like that, yeah, that's a good one.
All right, Weisskopf.
So
Go ahead, man. We got back to you.
yeah, no, you promised, right? You know, so let me take my pad out here. So everybody has to figure out, right, their own techniques for level setting, you know, themselves, which is, by the way, I had to throw this in there. It's another way of structure matters, right? But you know, does that mean everybody should take like 3 minutes, 5 minutes to meditate? Because according to Guy, I think, you know, meditation really helps level set. I think that's fair, right? You know, what are the other techniques we should use to accomplish the task at hand?
Well, I think that the more interested you get in the way your state of mind works, the more you'll see how it works, the more you'll naturally navigate. And I give you an example. Okay, so there's lots of examples, but I had a client that ran a business and was very volatile. So he was sent by his COO because his volatility was just really a challenge to the culture and to the team. So he sat down with me. He's like, you know, I got this really bad temper, and I need to get over it. So I said, well, look, the thing is, you got to realize that I gave him the same rap I gave you. You know, I don't have a lot of material. So he said, well, you can't just ignore an angry thought. It's too strong. It's like dealing with a tidal wave. It just bowls you over. You can't. So basically he said, how am I supposed to ignore an angry thought? So we talked about, you know, I wanted him to get a real understanding of how thought works, because thought is tricky. It feels rock solid. It doesn't feel like thought, but if you treat it like thought, it will disappear, right? Now, once you get a feel for that, once you understand that, if you know that you're thinking, if you know you're feeling your thinking, and you know your thinking's not helpful, you won't bother to take any notice of it. You don't need a technique. So by the end of this program, the staff told me that he wasn't reactive anymore. And when I called him up, I said, hey, how you doing? He says, oh, I'm doing really good. I haven't had to use anything you taught me. I said, well, what do you mean? Your team told me that you had this major problem, and normally you would have blown up and, you know, stomped around for 2 days and then reconvened the meeting, but you just carried on talking about it. You didn't skip a beat. I said, so you didn't get angry. You know what he said? He said, why would I? So when somebody understands state of mind and how thought works, they go from how do you to why would I?
So you're talking about I can never pronounce this word, compartmentalizing things.
No.
Because
I mean,
I got to push back. Forgetting thoughts that are going against you, that are frustrating you or hurting you is not an easy thing for most people.
let me give you an analogy, Dan, just because I think it'd be the easiest way of explaining what I'm trying to say, okay? Let's say you want to go on a diet, and on this diet, you're not supposed to eat dairy, sugar, or gluten, but you love dairy, sugar, and gluten. So it's really hard and you're not doing very well, okay? So you're looking for ways to not eat the foods that you love. Now, I think, this is my analogy. Let's say someone sits you down and for an afternoon, they show you all the biological processes that happen to human beings when they eat dairy, gluten, and sugar, right? So you literally understand what's happening in your cells and what will happen over the next 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years if you eat, right? And for the purpose of this example, let's say it's really bad, right? I think you'll automatically be less tempted to eat sugar, dairy, and gluten. Now, the analogy here is the way we relate to our thoughts, that's kind of our mental diet. But most people don't understand the link between your mental diet and your mental health, and they don't know how to assess the nutritional value of the thoughts they're eating, and they don't even know they're eating them. So in my experience, the missing piece is this education. And when people get this education, they go from, oh my God, how do you blah, 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 to, oh, why would you do that unless you wanted to waste your time and feel bad?
I think that part
I'm going to
of
let Joshua run with it. Thank you.
Yeah, Joshua, we've got 3 minutes left of Aaron's time,
Sorry,
so
Josh.
let's go ahead and get one last one in there.
Sure. So I think part of awareness is labeling. You asked for kind of from a sports standpoint, and there was a time where I was teaching one of my nephews how to lift weights, and lift weights is something I'm passionate about and I've done my whole life. And he got under the squat bar and he was wavering, and I said, I told him he was afraid. He said, oh no, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm like, no, this is fear. I want you to feel this. This is what this is. This is called, what you're feeling is called fear. Now feel it. And then now we're going to do this anyway. But understanding what you are is you're feeling is, hey, this is just fear. It's just the negative form of excitement. And so that's all fear is. It's excitement. It's a negative form of excitement. So now you're excited to get under this bar. This feeling that you're feeling is fear, and we're going to label it. And now I can think about what it is and say, this is just fear. Let me take the fear out of it and keep the excitement and go towards this, right? And I think that from a sports standpoint, it's understanding that labeling of this is what this is. This is an emotion. It's not helpful. And what you're saying is that awareness of that emotion and labeling it is the first step that doesn't execute on getting rid of that and deciding how to focus. But the awareness of it and labeling of it is kind of is the first step, if you will, of getting to a point where you're actually executing on this, right? Moving forward in this clarity of mind.
Yeah. And you know, I yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And by the way, in doing that, you're taking back control, which ultimately is so important to make yourself feel better.
Totally. And
well, we just hit the top of the hour. So I think anyone who wants to learn more, Aaron's website's in the chat, One Thought. And I love how he simplifies it down even in the name. So I really appreciate you coming on, my friend, and sharing this thought with everybody. And it really opened my eyes when I met you about a little over a year ago. So it's great to share it with the team here. We'll have a write-up of this coming out next week. And then next week, we're talking about a bunch of innovation themes with the Grizzle team. They're having their conference, and then they're coming on our show in the afternoon. Aaron, thank you very much. And you have a wonderful Well, I think it's probably bedtime for you at this point.
Way past, way past.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Aaron. See you, everybody.